Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. They attacked a rescue ship. Earth's response erased them from history. The red alert blared through the medical convoy as Captain James gripped the command chair, his knuckles turned white as he watched the approaching ships on the main display. 5 sleek vessels with predatory lines and glowing weapon ports, unmistakably warships, were closing in fast. "This can't be happening," he muttered. The convoy of 5 Earth vessels had been dispatched 3 weeks ago, when news reached the United Earth government about the devastating quake that had struck the mining colony on Alara 7. Although relations with the Thenary were cool at best, Earth had immediately offered humanitarian aid. After some hesitation, the Thenary government had accepted. Now, as they approached the disaster zone, something had gone terribly wrong. "Captain, they're powering weapons," called Lieutenant Parker from the tactical station. The young officer's voice cracked with tension. James pressed the fleet-wide communication button. "All ships, this is Captain James. We are on a humanitarian mission, broadcast identification and purpose on all channels. Emergency protocols." The 5 ships of the convoy, the Mercy, the Hope, the Samaritan, the Comfort, and James's own vessel, the Goodwill, were medical ships painted bright white with the Universal Red Cross emblem clearly visible on their hulls. They carried no weapons beyond point defense systems designed to destroy incoming space debris. Instead, their holds were filled with medical supplies, emergency shelters, water purifiers, and hundreds of doctors and relief workers who had volunteered for the mission. "Sir," the communications officer Reed reported, her fingers dancing across her console, "the Thenary vessels are not responding to our hails." James stood, his tall frame tense. "Put me on an open broadcast, maximum power." Reed nodded, and James took a deep breath. "Thenary vessels, this is Captain James of the Earth Medical Convoy. We are unarmed and carrying humanitarian aid for your colony on Alara 7. We have permission from your government to enter this space. Please respond." The bridge fell silent as they waited. The only sound was the soft beeping of instruments and the hum of the engines. No response. "Maybe it's a misunderstanding," suggested Dr. Miller, the mission's medical director, who had been invited to the bridge to witness their arrival. "Perhaps they don't recognize our ships." Before James could respond, the tactical console erupted with warnings. "Energy spike, they're firing." Parker shouted. James had just enough time to yell, "Evasive maneuvers," before the first blast hit. The Goodwill shuddered as energy beams sliced through space. James watched in horror as the Mercy, at the front of their formation, took a direct hit. The medical ship's hull cracked open, atmosphere venting in a cloud of crystallizing moisture, before secondary explosions tore the vessel apart. 327 people, whispered Dr. Miller, her face ashen. 327 medical personnel and relief workers were on that ship. "All ships, scatter pattern. Emergency protocols." James ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around him, but it was too late for the Hope and the Comfort. The warships, moving with practiced precision, cut through the convoy's formation. Their weapons, far more powerful than intelligence reports had suggested, tore through the unarmed medical vessels with horrifying ease. On the Goodwill's bridge, alarms wailed as systems failed throughout the ship. A support beam crashed down, narrowly missing the navigation console. "Captain, the Samaritan is breaking away," Parker reported. "Lieutenant Emily is taking her out of the combat zone." James nodded grimly. "At least one ship might escape." "Reed, send emergency transmission to Earth Command, full sensor data, visual feed, everything. Priority Alpha. They're jamming us, use the quantum channel." Reed worked frantically at her station while James turned to the main display. 2 warships were pursuing the Samaritan, while the other 3 were turning toward the Goodwill. "Parker, divert all power to engines. We need to draw them away from the Samaritan." "Aye, Captain." Parker's young face was set with determination as the Goodwill lurched forward, its medical engines never designed for such maneuvers. James felt a surge of pride as his crew carried out his orders without hesitation, even knowing what it likely meant. "Reed, is the transmission ready?" "Yes, sir, quantum channel open, but it's unstable." James took one last look at his bridge crew, then faced the camera. His voice was calm but intense as he spoke. "Earth Command, this is Captain James of the medical convoy to Alara 7. We are under unprovoked attack by Thenary warships. The Mercy, Hope, and Comfort have been destroyed with all hands. We have visual confirmation that these are military vessels, not pirates or rogue elements. They fired without warning on clearly marked medical ships. The Samaritan is attempting escape with Lieutenant Emily in command. We are creating a diversion to cover their retreat. I am transmitting full sensor data of the attack." Another blast struck, more powerful than before, sending sparks showering from a nearby console. "The Samaritan has made it to the jump point." "They're away," Parker called out. A smile flickered across James's face. "At least some of us will make it home." He turned back to the camera for his final words. "Earth Command, the Thenary have revealed their true nature today. They fired on those who came only to help. Remember the crews of the Mercy, the Hope, the Comfort, and the Goodwill. Remember us, and ensure this doesn't happen again." As James finished, the ship took another devastating hit. The deck plates buckled, and smoke filled the air. In the final moments before the transmission cut off, the bridge crew of the Goodwill stood at attention beside their captain, facing their end with dignity. 3 days later, Lieutenant Emily sat in the captain's chair of the Samaritan. Her ship limped through space, damaged but still functional. Half her crew was wounded, and all were haunted by what they had witnessed. "How much longer until we reach Earth's face?" she asked her navigation officer. 18 hours at current speed, Lieutenant, came the reply. Emily nodded silently. She had replayed the events countless times in her mind. Why had the Thenary attacked? The mission had been cleared at the highest levels, there had been no warnings, no demands, just immediate and overwhelming violence against ships that had come to help. She looked around at her exhausted crew. "We'll make it," she promised them. "And when we do, Earth will know what happened. Captain James and the others, their sacrifice won't be forgotten." The recording ended, and the room fell silent. Captain James's final message, his face bloodied but determined, froze on the massive display screen for several seconds before anyone in the Earth Security Council chamber spoke. The only sound was a muffled sob from someone in the back row. Admiral Wilson stood motionless at the podium, his weathered face betraying no emotion. Behind him, Lieutenant Emily sat with bandages still visible on her arms and face. She had delivered the Samaritan back to Earth space just 12 hours ago. "Play it again," ordered President Maria, her voice tight with controlled rage. The recording began once more. When it ended, President Maria turned to the gathered representatives. 1,238 dead, she said quietly, doctors, nurses, engineers, rescue workers, people who volunteered to help others in need. She stood up, her small frame somehow filling the room. This was not a mistake. This was not a misunderstanding. The Thenary deliberately fired on clearly marked medical ships carrying humanitarian aid that they had requested. Admiral Wilson stepped forward. "Our intelligence confirms that these were Thenary military vessels acting under official orders. We've intercepted communications indicating that this was a planned attack, not a rogue action." A council member raised his hand. Could this be a response to some perceived threat? Perhaps they believed our ships carried weapons or spies. Lieutenant Emily's voice cut through the chamber, sharp with grief and anger. "Sir, with respect, they scanned our ships thoroughly before opening fire. They knew exactly what they were shooting at. The Mercy had its medical bays visible through observation ports, they could literally see the doctors inside." The room fell silent again. President Maria pressed a button on her console, and a holographic display appeared showing the current positions of Earth's military forces. For too long, we've allowed other species to mistake our preference for peace as weakness, she said. We've limited our military to defensive operations. We've kept our most advanced technologies classified to avoid appearing threatening. That ends today. Admiral Wilson took over the holographic controls. The display shifted to show the Sol system and its colonial territories. I've prepared a response plan, he said. Not a limited strike. Not a proportional response. A complete and systematic dismantling of Thenary military capability. Some council members shifted uncomfortably, but none spoke against him. We've maintained the appearance of having limited military technology because we believed it would help foster peaceful relations, Wilson continued, but make no mistake, Earth's defensive capabilities have advanced considerably in the last 20 years. He expanded the hologram to show a hidden fleet of ships in the outer solar system. The Sentinel fleet has remained classified until now, 97 ships with technology at least 2 generations beyond what we've publicly acknowledged. They can be ready to deploy in 72 hours. General Thomas, head of Earth's ground forces, stood up. We've also kept our Marine Corps at minimal visible strength, but our actual numbers are 5 times what is publicly known. Special Forces teams have been training for environments just like this, just in case. President Maria nodded. I'm activating the Humanitarian Protection Doctrine effective immediately. The council members murmured among themselves. The doctrine had been written decades ago but never invoked. It authorized Earth's full military response against any force that deliberately targeted humanitarian operations. This isn't about revenge, President Maria said, though her eyes suggested otherwise. This is about establishing a principle that will never be violated again. Earth's mercy missions are untouchable. The vote that followed was unanimous, the first time in 15 years that the Earth Security Council had agreed without a single dissenting voice. News of the attack spread across Earth and its colonies like wildfire. Public reaction was swift and unified. In New Sydney, thousands gathered outside the trade embassy, their normally cheerful faces now grim and determined. They didn't shout or riot, they simply stood in silence, holding images of the destroyed medical ships. In the orbital habitats above Old London, manufacturing facilities voluntarily converted their production lines to military supplies, workers pulled double shifts without complaint. In the agricultural domes of Mars, farmers pledged their harvests to support the coming operation, ensuring Earth's forces would not lack for supplies. The broadcast of Captain James's final message had united humanity in a way not seen for generations. Political divisions that had seemed so important just days before now felt meaningless. In the massive underwater military facility beneath the Pacific Ocean, Admiral Wilson walked briskly down a corridor with Lieutenant Emily at his side. Her injuries were still healing, but she had refused medical leave. You understand what we're asking of you? Wilson said without slowing his pace. Yes, sir, Emily replied. You want me to serve as tactical advisor for the strike force? Emily asked. Wilson nodded. I witnessed their attack patterns firsthand. Emily stared at the ship suspended in the center of the chamber, a massive vessel sleek and dark, unlike any publicly associated with Earth's fleet. The Retribution, Wilson said. Our newest command ship. I want you as my second officer. Emily looked down. I'm just a lieutenant, sir. Not anymore, Wilson said, handing her a small box. Inside were the insignia of a commander, a field promotion the Security Council had approved an hour ago. Emily closed her hand around the insignia, thinking of Captain James and the others who had died while trying to help people in need. When do we leave, sir? Final preparations will take 3 days, Wilson replied. We're mobilizing everything we have. The Thenary hurt us. They hurt us badly, but they're about to learn something about humanity that they didn't account for. What's that, sir? Emily asked. Wilson's eyes hardened. That our capacity for compassion is matched only by our capacity for righteous fury, when that compassion is betrayed. On the 3rd day, the people of Earth gathered around screens and holographic displays to watch the departure of the fleet. What had once been hidden was now revealed, ship after ship, each more advanced than anything Earth had publicly acknowledged. President Maria addressed the United Planets from the steps of the Global Assembly. Today we send this message to all who would mistake our kindness for weakness. Earth's mercy is sacred. Those who violate it will face not our anger, but our justice, and our justice will be complete. The massive ships rose from hidden bases on Earth, the Moon, and Mars, joining the fleet already assembled in orbit. Their hulls gleamed in the sunlight as they formed up in perfect formation. Admiral Wilson stood on the bridge of the Retribution, with Commander Emily at his side. Before him, the crew waited for the order that would begin the most significant military operation in Earth's recent history. That he thought once more of the medical ships and the rescue workers who had only wanted to help. His voice was calm as he gave the command, "All ships, commence Operation Righteous Return, for those who fell, bringing mercy, we now bring justice." The fleet turned toward Thenary space and vanished into the darkness, carrying with them humanity's terrible answer to those who had mistaken compassion for weakness. Preparations and first strike. The massive Earth fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Hellas system. 50 ships formed a perfect attack formation, with the Retribution at its center. This remote star system contained a major Thenary military base on its fourth planet, far from civilian populations. Admiral Wilson had chosen it as their first target for exactly that reason. On the bridge of the Retribution, Commander Emily studied the tactical display. The familiar weight of anger sat in her chest as it had since watching her fellow rescue workers die, but now that anger had a purpose. "Thenary defense grid is activating," reported Tactical Officer Mason. "They've detected us." Wilson nodded calmly. "Right on schedule. Open fleet-wide communication." When the channel opened, Wilson spoke clearly, "This is Admiral Wilson of the United Earth Fleet to all ships. Remember why we're here. Remember who we're fighting for. Clean strikes, minimal collateral damage, we are not them." Commander Emily watched the faces of the bridge crew harden with determination. Most had lost friends on the medical convoy. "Sir," Communications Officer Patel called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the base." The main display flickered to life, showing a Thenary military commander. The alien's gray-ridged face showed surprise, quickly masked by arrogance. "Earth vessels, you have entered restricted Thenary space. Withdraw immediately or—" Wilson cut the transmission with a gesture. They had their chance to talk when the medical ships were hailing them. He turned to Emily. "Commander, commence Operation Righteous Return." Emily's voice was steady as she gave the order, "All ships, execute Phase 1." The Thenary commander in the base watched in confusion as the Earth fleet suddenly disappeared. "Where did they go?" he demanded. "Find them." His sensor operator worked frantically at the controls. "They were just there, 50 ships, and now they're gone." "Impossible, ships don't just vanish." The base shook violently, cutting off his words. Warning alarms blared throughout the facility. "We're under attack," shouted the security chief. "Multiple precision strikes on our defense systems." The commander stared at the emergency displays in disbelief. Somehow, the Earth ships were hitting key military targets with perfect accuracy while remaining invisible to sensors. "Launch all fighters. Power up the main cannon," he ordered, but it was already too late. On the Retribution, Emily watched the operation unfold with cold satisfaction. The prototype cloaking technology, never before used in actual combat, was working perfectly. The Thenary couldn't see the Earth ships, they couldn't target them, couldn't even track where the attacks were coming from. "Stealth squadrons report, all primary targets neutralized," Mason reported. "Defense grid is down. Communication arrays destroyed. Hangars sealed, our ships are grounded." Admiral Wilson nodded. Phase 2. Emily relayed the order, and the Earth fleet shimmered back into visibility, surrounding the Thenary base in an inescapable formation. "Open communication to the base," Wilson ordered. When the Thenary commander appeared on screen again, his arrogance was gone. "This is Admiral Wilson of Earth. Your defensive capabilities have been neutralized. Your ships are grounded. Your communications to the government are cut off." The Admiral leaned forward slightly. "3 weeks ago, you fired on our medical ships. You killed over 1,000 unarmed rescue workers. Now you will answer for that action." The Thenary commander's ridged face was pale. "We were following orders from the High Command. They said your ships were carrying weapons disguised as medical supplies, a lie." Wilson said flatly, "Had your own scans confirmed before you fired? You knew exactly what you were shooting at." He turned to Emily. "Commander, you watched your fellow rescue workers die. What are your thoughts?" Emily stepped forward, facing the alien who represented those who had murdered her friends. "You had a choice," she said quietly but intensely. "Every soldier has a choice. When given an immoral order, you chose to fire on doctors and relief workers who came to help your people. Now we have made our choice." The commander seemed to shrink under her gaze. "What are you going to do?" Wilson answered, "We will not target your civilians as you targeted ours, but your military capability will be removed permanently." He gave a hand signal, and the communication cut off. "Launch precision strikes on all remaining military infrastructure," Wilson ordered. "Then deploy ground teams." 2 hours later, Earth Special Forces moved through the captured Thenary base. They wore advanced combat suits that made them almost invisible as they downloaded data from computers and planted charges on military equipment too large to destroy from orbit. Major Tom led his squad through the command center, where frightened Thenary personnel were being processed and detained. "Sir," called one of his soldiers, "you need to see this." The soldier pointed to a computer display showing battle plans. Tom's blood ran cold as he realized what he was seeing. "Get this to the Admiral immediately," he ordered. Priority Alpha. Back on the Retribution, Admiral Wilson and Commander Emily stared at the evidence Major Tom had discovered, detailed attack scenarios against 3 Earth colony worlds, civilian populations specifically marked as targets. They wanted to test Earth's response with the convoy attack. "If we hadn't come with overwhelming force, they would have hit our colonies next," Emily said. Wilson finished, "Millions of civilians would have died." He turned to Communications Officer Patel. "Send this intelligence to Earth immediately, and prepare a fleet-wide broadcast." When all ships were connected, Wilson addressed his forces. "What we've discovered confirms that our mission is not just about justice for our fallen, it's about preventing an even greater tragedy. The Thenary were planning widespread attacks against our civilian colonies. We will not give them that chance. We proceed with the original operation plan, but with increased urgency. Next target, their shipyard at Vega 9. We leave in 6 hours." As the Admiral finished, Commander Emily studied the faces of the bridge crew. What she had seen in their eyes earlier, determination mixed with righteous anger, had changed to something colder and more focused. This was no longer just about punishment, it was about protection. The Earth fleet regrouped around the captured Thenary base, preparing for their next strike. The message they were sending was clear: humanity would not just avenge its dead, it would ensure such an attack could never happen again. The Thenary High Command gathered in their underground war room on the home world. Minister Dax, head of military operations, paced nervously as reports flooded in from across their territory. "Another shipyard lost," reported a junior officer, his voice shaking. The supreme leader of the Thenary, a massive figure whose gray skin bore ceremonial scars of 100 victories, leaned forward in his chair. "You assured me humans were technologically inferior," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You said our colonies would fall easily. You promised me their response to the medical ship attack would be weak and disorganized." Minister Dax swallowed hard. "Supreme Leader, our intelligence was flawed. The humans concealed their true capabilities. We now face the consequences of our failure." The Supreme Leader turned to the strategic display, where red icons showed Earth fleet movement slicing through Thenary space like a knife through flesh. Captain Robert's scout ship drifted silently near the massive Thenary command station. The Shadow was the smallest vessel in Earth's fleet, but for this mission, that was an advantage. "All systems dark," whispered Lieutenant Diane, the ship's tactical officer. "We're completely invisible to their sensors." Robert nodded. His 12-person crew had been handpicked by Admiral Wilson for this critical mission. While the main fleet drew attention with attacks on military bases, the Shadow would strike at the heart of their command structure. "Team status?" Robert asked. "Strike team equipped and ready in the drop bay," reported Sergeant Kane, the team leader. "Remember, we need their command codes and fleet deployment plans intact. This isn't about destruction, it's about information." The bridge crew nodded. "Docking in 3 minutes," the pilot said, hands moving delicately over the controls. Admiral Wilson and Commander Emily stood on the bridge of the Retribution as it led the third attack wave against the Thenary defense fleet at Centauri 8. The space around them blazed with weapons fire as Earth ships demonstrated their technological superiority. "Their formations are breaking," reported Tactical Officer Mason. "They're following standard Thenary doctrine," Wilson said. "Exactly as expected. Now we show them why that's a mistake." Emily gave the order, "Execute pattern Omega." The Earth fleet suddenly shifted their seemingly random movements, resolving into a complex attack formation no strategist had ever encountered. Ships that had appeared to be retreating now cut behind enemy lines, vessels that seemed vulnerable revealed hidden weapon systems. On board the Thenary command ship, panic spread as their carefully organized defense collapsed into chaos. "They anticipate every move," the fleet commander shouted. The answer, if he had known it, would have terrified him even more. Earth had been studying Thenary battle tactics for years, preparing for a conflict they had hoped would never come. On the Thenary command station, Sergeant Kane's Special Forces team moved silently through the corridors, their adaptive camouflage bending light around them. They reached the sealed doors of the command center. "Breach in 3, 2, 1, Kane whispered, and the doors slid open. Earth Special Forces flowed into the room like shadows. Before the Thenary officers could react, neural disruptors pulsed. One by one, they collapsed at their stations. "Clear," reported Kane. "All targets neutralized." Lieutenant Diane moved quickly to the central computer terminal, downloading command network access. "Sir, you need to see this." On the screen, war plans unfolded, not just attacks on Earth colonies, but detailed designs for biological weapons engineered specifically to target human physiology.